You learn a long time ago to stop asking for help, and no one ever noticed the exact moment it happened. From the outside, you look capable, steady, the person who has everything quietly handled. People admire how little you seem to need. They call you strong, low maintenance, independent, the reliable one. What they don't see is the quiet exhaustion of carrying everything alone, the reflex that makes you say, "I'm fine," before you've even checked whether you actually are. Research consistently shows that the people who appear the most self-sufficient are often the very ones who learned very early that needing someone simply was not safe. So you became the one who gives, never the one who asks. You became the helper, the fixer, the steady hand. And somewhere along the way, leaning on another person started to feel far more dangerous than just struggling by yourself in silence. So when did this start? When did you become the person who would rather do absolutely all of it alone than risk being let down by someone again? There was a version of you years ago who did reach out. A younger you who cried openly, who asked for comfort, who simply assumed someone would come. You were the child who needed things, the way every child does, without shame and without apology. But slowly, almost invisibly, you became something else. The dependable one, the mature one, the kid adults proudly described as so grown up for their age. You learned to read the room before you ever entered it. You learned to solve your own problems quietly, because asking felt like a burden, and being a burden felt like the single worst thing you could possibly be. You became the friend others leaned on, the one who remembered everyone's pain but rarely, if ever, shared your own. And you got good at it. So good that people slowly stopped checking on you, because you seemed like someone who never needed checking on. Until one day, something shifted. You realized you had built an entire life where almost no one knew how to reach you, because somewhere along the way you had quietly, carefully taught them all not to try. This pattern actually has a name in psychology. It traces back to the work of John Bowlby, the British psychiatrist who developed attachment theory. Bowlby observed that when a child's emotional needs are met inconsistently, the child adapts by minimizing those needs altogether. Researchers later came to call this an avoidant attachment style. In simple terms, your brain learned that depending on others led to disappointment, so it quietly stopped depending. Neuroscience adds another layer to all of this. When closeness itself begins to feel unsafe, the nervous system stays subtly braced, constantly scanning for the moment it will have to handle everything alone again. This isn't weakness, and it certainly isn't coldness. It's a survival strategy that genuinely worked when you needed it the most. Your brain simply prioritized self-protection over connection, because at some point in your life, that was honestly the smarter bet. The real trouble is that survival strategies don't switch themselves off on their own, and no one hands you an instruction manual for turning them down. They keep running long after the danger has passed, quietly shaping how you love, how much you trust, and how alone you're willing to let yourself feel before you finally say something out loud. The very wiring that once kept you safe is still quietly making decisions for you today. To understand where it truly began, you have to look back even further. Mary Ainsworth, who worked closely alongside Bowlby, studied how young children respond when the people they rely on become unpredictable. She found that some children stop showing distress entirely, not because they feel none, but because expressing it never reliably brought them comfort. Maybe you grew up reading faces before you could even read words. You learned to sense a mood shift in the silence before a door closed, in the precise way footsteps fell in the hallway. You adapted early, becoming whatever the room seemed to need so that the room itself would stay calm. If an adult was overwhelmed, you became easy and undemanding. If the house was tense, you learned how to become almost invisible. You learned to soothe yourself because waiting for someone else to do it had only ever taught you how to keep on waiting. None of this was ever a conscious choice. It was a small person doing the most reasonable thing imaginable, surviving the emotional weather they were handed in the only way they knew how, and quietly promising themselves they would never, ever feel that helpless again. But here's what they don't tell you about becoming this self-sufficient. The very same skill that once protected you also quietly isolates you now. There is a real and important difference between walls and boundaries. Boundaries protect your peace while still letting the right people in. Walls, on the other hand, keep absolutely everyone out, including the ones who would have gladly stayed. And somewhere along the way, you may have stopped noticing the difference between the two. There's a difference between solitude and isolation as well. Solitude restores you and gently returns you to yourself. Isolation slowly convinces you that you are, and always will be, fundamentally on your own. The hidden cost of never needing anyone is that you also never quite let yourself be fully known. People love the version of you that has it all together, but they almost never get to meet the version that is tired and afraid. And slowly, without meaning to, you begin to believe that the capable version is the only one anyone could ever actually want. So ask yourself honestly, right now, when was the last time you let someone see you struggle? When did you last say the words, "I need help," and truly let yourself mean them? Now look at that exact same trait from a completely different angle. The hypervigilance that so quietly exhausts you is also extraordinary pattern recognition. You read people accurately because you spent years carefully studying them just to stay safe. You notice what almost everyone else missed, the small shifts, the unspoken tension, the things people were trying so desperately hard to hide. That is not paranoia. That is depth. Your independence isn't some flaw to be fixed. It is living proof of how deeply resourceful you became with almost no support to lean on. You learned to hold yourself together at the exact moments when no one at all was holding you. That takes a quiet, uncommon kind of strength that most people are lucky enough to never have to find. Few people ever realize just how much steady effort it took for you to look this effortless. The work now is not to abandon that strength or pretend it never mattered. It's to let it finally rest sometimes, to let it become a conscious choice instead of an automatic reflex. You're not broken, you're not too much, and you're not too distant. You are someone who survived by becoming capable, and capability was never, ever the real problem. So if you recognize yourself somewhere in these words, let this be the permission you've quietly been waiting so long for. Needing people does not erase your strength, and it never has. Research on long-term well-being consistently points to genuine connection as one of the deepest sources of human resilience we have. You were never meant to carry all of it alone, and the simple fact that you somehow could doesn't mean that you always have to. You can keep your hard-won independence and still let someone in. You can be the strong one and still allow yourself to be held. So start small. Let one person see one true thing about you. Notice, gently and without judgment, that the world does not end when you do. The reflex to need, no one kept you safe once, and you can honor that, but you are fully allowed to outgrow it now. You are allowed to be a whole person, not just a provider for everyone else. You've protected everyone else for so long. Now, finally, it's your turn. Protect your peace.